we're sitting in the National Public Housing Museum in Little Italy in Chicago, and I'm here with the director, Lisa Lee. Lisa, thank you for meeting with me.
I'm so happy to be here, Jen.
I'm excited to talk to you. Just a little quick background. I went to UIC in this neighborhood, and I had been watching them build this museum the entire career, my entire college career, and then continued.
Maybe more than half your life.
Yes, continued to watch them build the museum for almost 15 years after that. So this is long awaited for me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you. Thank you for meeting with me.
Cool. Yeah, no, I mean, the building has actually been here since 1937,
Yes.
1938, but we really worked for the last 20 years to create the museum.
Okay, so I was right when I said 20 years.
Yeah.
I thought so. It's been a while. So Lisa, what is the National Public Housing Museum about, and why is it important that it's in Chicago?
Yeah, so the National Public Housing Museum is the first and only museum that's committed to interpreting the history of public housing in the United States. We're also an incredibly unique institution because we are a site of conscience, and what that means is we're a historic site. We're located in the last remaining building of the Jane Addams homes, and we're committed to not just preserving history, but we're connecting that history to contemporary issues to show its relevance. And we're also insisting that we can't solve any of the most important issues that we need to as a society unless we go back in time and ask, what have we not yet learned? And so our mission is to make sure that everyone has a place to call home, and we fight for housing as a human right. And we do that in some really pretty unique ways.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think it's impactful that it's in the former Jane Addams Hull House neighborhood.
Yeah, 100%. You're speaking my love language. Jane Addams, who's the namesake of the Jane Addams homes, she was a social reformer who built the Hull House settlement, which is just down the street from us on Halsted Street. And at one point, it was the most important address in the entire United States and arguably the world. She was America's first woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and also she was considered at one point America's most dangerous woman because she really worked hard to make sure that there was a true and lasting peace in our society. And for her, that meant that in order to have peace, you had to have immigrants' rights, you had to have women's rights, you had to have fair labor laws, and she really had a broad notion of what a robust democracy was. And so she threw open the doors of the Hull House settlement just down the street from us, and the world came to convene there to really address most of the sort of social ills around equity, justice, immigration at that time. And I just feel so lucky because I used to be the director of the Jane Addams Hull House Museum, and so coming over to be the director here with the namesake of this space, it was really wonderful. She died right before the housing project was opened, but she was also engaged in thinking about how public housing could advance all of her goals for justice and peace in society. And to be here on the near west side of Chicago, and what many people know as Little Italy, is a really wonderful place because it's at one point it was one of the most diverse neighborhoods. There was over 23 different immigrant groups that actually lived in this neighborhood. It was also the site of some of the most horrific labor conditions for the sweatshops and factory working, and also a lot of the worst tenements, like the housing existed in this city. And so, that's our neighborhood now where this beautiful museum is.
So it was by design. There's a lot of important and impactful public housing complexes throughout the city that all have their own stories. Is it by design that the museum is here, or more this is where you guys could get the space?
Well, around 20 years ago, in the wake of something called the Plan for Transformation, public housing residents identified this complex and said, we actually want the museum here.
Okay.
I'm not sure if people are familiar with the Plan for Transformation, but it was one of the largest urban renewal projects in our nation ever, and certainly in Chicago. And it was launched in around 2002, and it was meant to deal with racialized poverty. It was meant to address the crumbling buildings because of deferred maintenance, and also corruption in the Chicago Housing Authority, the CHA. But one of the first acts was the dismantling and the demolition of 11 of the high-rise projects all across city, like the names many people recognize: Cabrini Green, Robert Taylor Homes. And it represented the largest net loss of affordable housing in the entire history of the United States. So one of the first public housing projects, and that was the result of the 1937 Housing Act, was the Jane Addams Homes in this community that was called ABLA, which stood for ABLA, which was the Abbott, Brooks, Loomis, and Adams homes, and that was those homes on the Near West Side. And so they really wanted to preserve this beautiful building in order to create a museum that could not just preserve history, but it would challenge stereotypes about what public housing was, and challenge sort of misconceptions about public housing residents, and also to continue to fight and struggle for housing as a human right into the future.
That's interesting. And in what ways did the museum center the voices of public housing residents throughout the city or the nation?
Yeah, so, well, the first thing to say is that our nation has more historic homes, like house museums, than McDonald's, Burger Kings, and Pizza Hut combined. So there's a lot of historic house museums in the United States, but most of them are dedicated to telling the story of wealthy white men, or dedicated to telling the story of the prominent architect or somebody who built that space. We are a very different kind of historic house because we tell the stories of the tens of thousands of poor people who actually lived in the Jane Addams homes. In order to do that, our nation does not normally save the artifacts with the same amount of commitment. So objects and artifacts of stories of people of color, of women, of people who are living in poverty are not normally saved. And so what we had to do is we start with the age-old methodology, which is called oral history. A story is the shortest distance between two people. It's the way that people have been preserving history, for eons and eons. And so the first thing we did was launch a really robust, beautiful oral history program that started to gather the stories of public housing residents, knowing that we could use those stories to then help create exhibits and programs and to sort of amplify those voices and stories. And we always say that in addition to being a museum, we really are called to our nation to have a much more inclusive foundation for the stories that we believe are worthy to be preserved, saved, and shared. And so that's the work that we do. So we started gathering the stories. We have a beautiful oral history archive that the Mellon Foundation and the Donnelly Foundation helped us build, and that actually grew to a really inclusive oral history training program called the Beauty Turner Academy, where we train public housing residents and other people to become oral historians. And we're a great city for oral history, right? We're the city of Dr. Timuel Black, we're the city of Ida B. Wells, Barnett, we're the city of Studs Terkel. And so it's very much in the DNA of Chicago to use oral history to save history and to really, make this, all these stories come alive. And so that's what we did.
Yeah, I was saying that it would be cool if you guys had either in the gift shop or just like even a library of all of the memoirs that people have written from growing up in public housing.
Yeah, well, we actually have an archive, and many of those stories you can hear on our website. So if you go to www.mphm.org, we have an oral history archive and people can hear those stories. And also, we do have an amazing gift shop too.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out.
Which actually is, we're hoping to build it as a cooperative with public housing residents. And so all throughout the museum, it's the stories of public housing residents that animate this place. And so you will actually, get to see, objects and artifacts from people like Sonia Sotomayor. And she grew up in Bronxdale Homes, and she actually wrote her own label that describes her beautiful photograph of, you know, sort of her graduating from high school, standing in front of her public housing complex. You'll get to see like so many personal, beautiful objects from public housing residents who tell their own stories in this museum.
Yeah, we did a little pre-interview walkthrough, and it's really beautiful how large the space is, how many different things are in here. Is the museum complete? Are you guys still working on it?
I would say that the museum is 99.9% complete, except that we are a kind of 21st century museum of the future, and so nothing is sedimented, and we're constantly evolving, and we're trying to grow and respond to the needs of all of our diverse stakeholders. So we have a lot of different kinds of exhibits in this museum. We have 3 restored apartments from 3 different generations. Yeah, which is the kind of heartbeat of the museum. But we also have a contemporary art gallery that actually has the objects of and artifacts of public housing residents. We have other exhibition spaces throughout the museum as well, and including a beautiful outdoor sculpture garden with Edgar Miller.
So
it's beautiful animal court there. And we have one of our really unique things that we do is that we bridge arts, culture, and public policy around housing. And so all throughout the museum, you'll also be able to see world-class artists and artworks, including Amanda Williams and Lech Jayafus's beautiful entranceway that is called Resilient Hues. And we also have a big mural on the front. And so there's so much to see when you come here.
It's beautiful. There's so much to look at. When we were walking around, like, I was listening, but also couldn't stop taking in everything around me.
I love that. I really hope that people, when they come here, like, all of their sort of expectations are completely upended, because there is a kind of mainstream narrative that's out there about public housing, and we really challenge people to think much more broadly and differently, not just about this history, but also about the spaces and how much love and care that families put into their homes. And so there was, and so in addition to, I'll just say that in addition to the amplifying voices of public housing residents, we also brought in just the best exhibition designers. We worked with amazing artisans and artists. We have so many guest curators in this museum. For example, when people go upstairs, there's a beautiful record room with hundreds of vinyl albums.
Very cool.
It's curated by DJ Spinderella, who is the first woman who was just who was just inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She grew up in the Pink Houses in public housing, and she helped to tell the story of how musicians who lived in public housing helped to create the incredibly diverse and vivacious soundtrack of American life. And so, like, that's a kind of space that is filled with so much joy, and that's something that I think people don't expect sometimes when they're coming to a public housing museum. It's a very serious place because housing insecurity is one of the most preeminent issues of our time, but it's also a space that's filled with so much love and joy.
So how did this museum come to be? Like, whose idea was it? How did you guys manage to grow it from the idea to what it is now?
Yeah, so a group of residents led by Miss DeVera Beverly, but also including people like Miss Mary Baldwin and other public housing residents, had decided that they wanted to save the last remaining building. And one of the first people that they went to go talk to was Sunny Fisher, who was at that time the head of the Driehaus Foundation, one of the big foundations in the city of Chicago that also addresses sort of preservation issues. Sunny immediately said yes to the idea because Sunny Fisher herself also grew up in public housing, and also her good friend was Ruth Abrams, who is the founder of the Tenement Museum, which is another really beautiful kind of sister museum of ours that's in New York and also a site of conscience. So it took, 20 years. So we outlasted maybe like 3 or 4 different mayors, maybe 5. We outlasted maybe 6 or 7 different Chicago Housing Authority heads, but we persisted. And the first thing that we had to do was actually create narrative change and change the story, because in the beginning people would say, like, who the hell is going to a public housing museum? Or we would hear things with people saying stuff like, who would want to go to a museum that's a temple to single mothers? Like, just there were so many stereotypes about public housing that we had to challenge. So that took a long time to do that work, but we met with residents consistently, with town halls, with we were a museum in the streets for basically 20 years. We had exhibits all throughout the city. We gathered oral histories. And so it took a long time to change kind of the public will, but I think we actually really did that. And also, I think it was a good thing, because in addition to public housing residents, we also were able to work with just an incredible roster of scholars and activists and advocates for public housing. Richard Rothstein, like just Kianga Yamada Taylor, like just amazing scholars who helped to come on board and also advise us. So it really was a collective project with people coming together and all committed to working for housing as a human right.
Love it. And what's your favorite exhibit or artifact, or what's your favorite thing in the museum right now?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. It kind of depends. I mean, one of the things that I really love is throughout the museum there are these things called Care to Look, and Care to Look are the objects and artifacts that we preserved when we found and got the building. So they are kind of quirky things like intercoms or radiators or the bricks themselves, and all of them have extraordinary stories to tell, not just about the Jane Addams homes and the people who lived here, but also about our city and our nation and our commitment to this idea of a commonwealth. And so we really ask people to just, when you're walking through these halls in the building, to like pause and care to look at these amazing objects and artifacts, and also to take a moment to like learn the story of those things.
I think that was smart wording. Care to Look.
Oh good, we went through a lot. It was both, at one point it was Care to Look, exclamation point, Care to Look, and then it was Care to Look, and then it was
I think that
Care to
was,
Look, ellipsis, ... So thanks.
I think that was good wording. How can Chicagoans get involved with the museum's programs and events, and what would you say are the best ways for Chicagoans to support this museum?
Well, the first thing is we want each and every person in the city of Chicago to come visit this museum. We're incredibly proud that we were nominated by US Today to be one of the top 10 new museums in the entire United States. So everyone should come here. There's so much to see here. And we had a public program with a hip hop artist named Murs, and he sort of said, this place is perfect for people aged 3 months to 103. So there really is something for everybody. And we have lots of programs that are offered, from serious, sort of political and social issues to dance parties, and not to say that dance parties in Chicago aren't serious.
They're
like those are also very
serious.
But there's a whole range of different kind of programs. So people should go to our website, mphm.org, sign up for our newsletter, and then you'll get to hear first thing about these things. And then the other thing is we are a free museum for all of our exhibits, except for the guided tour of the historic apartments. And so we really rely on people's support, and anybody can join and be a member, and to be proud to call this place their civic and cultural home. And so we invite everybody to also join us as a member of this institution. And if you're a public housing resident, then membership is free. So for calling out to all the public housing residents out there.
Beautiful.
Cool. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you so much. Thanks for meeting with me. I really enjoyed our conversation. Come and visit the National Public Housing Museum. It's very meaningful, very cool.